So this is Haunt of Fear number 24. Nice cover by Jack Ingalls. And this is my first EC Golden Age book in my collection. Really love it, love it. Nice little entry point for Golden Age. And then you got the 2.0 on there. And then for the notes, it says that it was used in the U.S. Senate investigative report. So we'll be talking a little bit about that. And that's a nice cover too by Jack Ingalls. You got like this slop monster down there with the eyeballs. So that's going to be the part of the story that we're going to be covering later on. But I want to talk about like what they said about this book in the Senate before we get started. But just kind of, for those of you guys unfamiliar, back in the 1950s was like this big witch hunt on comic books, because everyone was saying that comic books were, were contributing to juvenile delinquency, which was like a hot topic back in those days. Which 50s is a weird time. You have a few things going on at this time too as well. You have this psychology, I forget his name, Weiner, whatever. He wrote The Seduction of the Innocent, which is a pretty, it was the first book that its main focus was literally the effect of comic books on children, on the juvenile delinquency, and people just ate this shit up. First of all, when this guy published himself, I think one of the first things that where it was published, it wasn't published like in a journal, peer-reviewed journal, scientific psychology journal. It was actually like in a housewife magazine or something, which it kind of tells you that it was kind of aimed a little bit more for sensationalism, and people just ate this shit up, like even the Senate got involved, and that's where we came with this trial for the comic books on April 21st, 1954, which is my brother's birthday, by the way, shout out. And they decided, we're gonna put these comic books on trial to see if this is what's causing juvenile delinquency, right? Never mind that, poverty might be causing to juvenile delinquency, maybe racism, maybe it's because of the war that was just over. And this is 1954, so you got a lot of kids that were growing up out of the war. Maybe you had a lot of like orphans coming out of the war. You know what I mean? Like, it could have been any of those, but no, the government said it's going to be comic books, right? And in a way, things don't change, right? Some things never change. You can still see it today. Anytime we have a tragedy, you guys remember the Columbine shooting, Marilyn Manson, or they blame Eminem or Grand Theft Auto, San Andreas and stuff. It's always something different, and it always feels like they're always looking for something to blame except the actual problem itself. So I think it's in a way to kind of cope with it. It makes an easy target, and I think for comic books at this time were kind of an easy target, because I've been surprised to see kind of like the reactions from some of the creators at the time. It's kind of like they were blindsided almost. Like these guys were just in their own world creating stuff, and they were just kind of happy to be able to make a living from these comic books and kind of express themselves freely and stuff. And then here comes this Weiner psychologist guy who was just kind of like bashing them and stuff like that. And it surprised me, the reaction, because because I feel like a lot, like the modern reaction to somebody bashing your craft would be like to get defensive and kind of dig in. But what I thought was kind of interesting was that some of these guys actually felt really bad, and they felt ashamed of what they were doing, and a lot of them just decided to quit, and they were just kind of like, they didn't dig in defensively. And because I feel like this was a different time when people actually believed in government maybe a little bit more. So yeah, I think a lot of people were kind of blindsided by that. So I'm going to be reading you guys what was said about this particular book in the Senate. This was actually mentioned on the opening day, because again, it was only supposed to be 2 days, but I guess the senators were having such a great time bashing on these guys that we're going to do it for a third. Yeah? So there was this guy, right? So on the first day, it was just kind of the senators, and the way they started off is because they started presenting their argument, right? And there was this gentleman called, what's his name? Richard Clenenden, executive director, right? So this guy was, hired by the Senate to actually investigate juvenile delinquency. So the Senate said, hey, we got juvenile delinquency going on. It's kind of surging. It's like, we need you to find out what it was. And this is what he came back with. He came back with comic books. He came back with an easy target. I felt like he kind of just read the psychologist's Seduction of the Innocent, and he was like, you know what, I'm going with this. I need to turn something into the Senators so I can, keep my job. Honestly, that's kind of how it kind of felt a little bit, in my opinion. I don't know if those were his intentions or not, but he actually had a background in juvenile delinquency. He worked in institutions for emotionally disturbed children and delinquent children. He was also a probation officer, so he had the resume for it, right? Again, but I feel like he ended up just going for the low-hanging fruit instead of actually tackling what the real issues were. So we're going to be talking about, he kind of goes in, he starts presenting his argument of why he thinks, and he starts pulling examples. He uses black magic, as one of his examples and stuff like that. But what he said particularly about Haunt of Fear 24, this is what he said. In the next comic, Haunt of Fear has 4 stories in which 8 people die violently. One story, entitled Headroom, has to do with a spinster who operates a cheap waterfront hotel. The renter of one of the rooms is a man that she would like to marry. To win his favor, she reduces his rent by letting his room during daytime hours to an ugly and vicious appearing man. This shot shows her renting the room to the individual. Meanwhile, there are daily reports that the murderer is loose in the city who cuts off and carries away his victim's head. The hotel keeper suspects that the vicious appearing daytime roomer and searches this room, where she discovers 6 heads hanging on the hooks in the closet. She is discovered there by her favorite roomer, who is returning to the hotel for the night. It develops that he is the murderer, and in the next picture shows the hotel keeper's head being added to the closet collection. So that is what was said in the comic book about Haunted Fear, and that is, I think, one of the stories and stuff like that. But again, very, very short, and there was just kind of like, as a matter of fact, I think one thing that we don't really get a lot of times from these critiques of these comic books was actually the sense of humor that some of these books had, the subtle sense of humor, the sense of irony that some of these books had, and also like some of the underlying like messages and like saying, if you behave like this, bad things are going to happen to you and stuff like that. And they also had like this kind of assumption that children are idiots and one-dimensional. I think people really underestimate how much children can actually understand the difference between right or wrong. And I don't think that it's literature itself that's going to change that, or any specific books or anything, but whatever. Anyways, this whole witch hunt for comic books, like, it goes on and on. I think this whole witch hunt for comic books was very interesting. It came at an interesting time, I think, because if you think of the 50s, you some people think of like white picket fences and the nucleus family and television sets and microwave sets and prosperity. But then if you ask other people, 50s sounds more like hatred, because remember, people weren't afforded civil rights until 1964. So 10 years later, there was a lot of racial tension during the 50s and a lot of activism and stuff like that. And that's something that people don't sometimes doesn't take into account when you think about the 50s. And I think that there was this kind of attitude in the 50s with like mainstream America to try to put up a front that, oh, this is a perfect country, everything's good, look how prosperous we are, and try to be pious and all that nonsense and stuff. And I think that comic books kind of struck a nerve, because comic books were so popular at the time, especially horror books. They were like all the rage. And I felt like they kind of struck a nerve with the mainstream America, because they talked about some of the stuff that still happen in homes. Like, for example, this story that we're going to be talking about today had domestic violence, and it also had alcoholism. And I felt like that made some of these things were kind of a reflection of what was going on in society. Again, these were like stories and they were exaggerated, but I felt like it might have struck a nerve with like saying, hey, there's some ugly stuff that also goes on in America as well. And I felt like that it kind of struck a nerve with people. Like, oh, we have to make people Christian and stuff like that. It's these comic books that are making people like that. But we know better than that. I think as far as like society's problems are a lot deeper than that. And but again, this was a witch hunt that nearly killed comic books and stuff. And superhero comic books were like the psychologist guy, he didn't like them either. He said that they were like homoerotic and I think communistic or whatever, fascist or whatever. I was like, I don't know. That guy was reaching for straws, guy. The guy was a fucking square. He was a freaking Karen in the 1950s. And also, you got to remember in the 1950s, there was literally McCarthyism was literally going on as far as like people were chasing down, communists and stuff. So I feel like this was a way for people to not actually address what the real ugly thing that was going on in America, which was discrimination. I feel like that was kind of the people's way to kind of like, look over there, Anyways, let's take a look at this story and find out what kind of ugly, nasty filth was inside of these pages. All right.
Alrighty, y'all. So we're gonna go ahead and get started on this story. And if you guys are wondering what's in the glass this week, it's this Great Lakes Crushworthy, whatever the hell this is. Some Ed Hardy looking shit. But yeah, this is a local brewery from around this area here in the Great Lakes. It's not bad, not bad. It's got like a little bit of a lemon taste. Let me fix this camera. Anyways, so again, nice awesome cover. Like I showed you guys earlier, there's like this little creepy thing right here. It's some kind of monster here. We're about to find out what it is. I love this. This is a Graham Ingalls cover, and I thought this was awesome. I really love this about the covers that they had: the Old Witch, the Vault Keeper, and Crypt Keeper. And then they kind of switched them around, like depending. This is the Old Witch, so she was on top. If you see like Tales from the Crypt Keeper was on top. So very nice. All right, so the Witch's Cauldron. This is awesome interior artwork, isn't it? Look at that. So this story starts off with this dude right here. Look, right, the guy's getting drunk. He's eating out of those old school like pot things. It's like not necessarily bottles and stuff. And his wife, she's pissed, but if she says anything, bam, she whips the shit out of him, right? And even though you got people talking about like, oh, she's always taking it, right? This guy's like, yeah, Jake's at it again, which is like the guy that's drinking. Sure does a good job. Never could get my old lady to screech like that. So these guys are kind of like glorifying like, domestic violence and stuff. And there's a reason why she takes this beating. As a matter of fact, she doesn't even take away the alcohol from him. She actually goes to go get the alcohol. She provides the alcohol for it. So that right there already is kind of a red flag, right? And you can kind of see she's got like this little sneer on her face. Like, I love that expression. Even though it's kind of a small, I think the artist did a great job of like showing, that kind of a evil kind of look on her face. And you kind of see that he kind of switches it. It's kind of like marital rape and stuff like that. I guess that's that's going on here as well. But she never stops taking the bottle from him, man. And then we find out here why. Because she's banging the guy that's the distillery, man. I forget what his name is. Clem Parker. So yeah, he's the guy that's whipping it up for her. And he's been sleeping with her. So they're coming up with a plan where they want Jake to die from alcohol. So he's kind of giving them this kind of bad, juju alcohol. And they're kind of hoping that he kind of croaks. But it's not happening. So they kind of come up with this device. Hey, we got to get this guy dead sooner rather than later. So she kind of baits him. And she's like, oh, I forgot to go get your alcohol today. Clem says he's got something special for you. So we're going to have to go over there. And then you see this guy walking through the woods heading over to the distillery. I love that this art right here, because you can kind of tell that he's waddling. Like, you can almost see that he's kind of like stumbling around just from like this awesome like art. I really appreciate the artists and the writers at this time that could say so much with just a single panel, because you can already see this guy like stumbling around through the bushes on his way to go get his beer. And I love how they also add like an interior dialogue where they're like, yeah, he was like thirsty. He could already taste it, because you can always see like his alcoholism. Like he really wanted a taste of that good stuff, So then once they got him in there, he's like, oh man, I got this special vat of, alcohol over here. That shit's good. That's the best shit I ever seen. I've ever made. You better go try it. So of course he goes over there. There's always like some kind of vat of like alcohol, acid, you know, choker toxins, whatever. That shit just seems to be laying around, man. OSHA needs to be contacted over this, right? Because this is, people always end up inside the fucking vat chemicals. Well, anyways, they throw his ass in there, and he kind of like dissolves into this alcohol. It's kind of like some kind of weird concoction that he did or whatever. He says, I thought of everything. I'm gonna be throwing some lye in there. And you can kind of see that he kind of just like melts into the vat of alcohol. You can see his expression right there. And they're like, yes, we did it. And they all head back down to Jake's house. And they're like, yeah, I did it. And we don't have to worry about Jake anymore. And then you have this ominous panel right here where you start seeing like the liquid coming out of the vat. And you start spilling over. And then you kind of see it. And it's kind of describing as if it was like this loathsome form of creeping liquid life. I love the alliteration that they used a lot in the Golden Age. This stuff was actually very, very, very prominent. I just love the way they were writing back in this time, because Silver Age was a little tougher to read, but this is a pretty poetic shit they be writing here. So let's see. Again, he turns into this alcohol monster or whatever. And he shows up to his house to see him, and boom! Look, he just consumes his ass. The guy's got a shotty, but man, what's a shotgun gonna do against a alcohol monster, man? Nothing. It's a liquid monster, bro. Like, why would you even try it, dude? Like, what the fuck? Just run, dude. And anyways, he goes after her, and then she flungs the dripping scalp at the two eyes and glared. So he pretty much dissolved Clem. So as you can say, like, she grabbed it. And it was just the scalp. So that's horrible, dude. That's awesome. And she's like, I'm gonna be sick. And you can kind of see that she's had enough of it. She kind of locks him out, even though it's kind of like a wooden house. So it's very difficult for her to like kind of do this, like make it airtight. But somehow she achieves this. So she's able to lock him out, right? And then it looks like an hour later, sunlight streamed through the window. It was morning. She sat huddled in misery, sick, waiting, and now she had kept out of the hideous, revolting form that was once her husband. Her courage flowed back. Somebody come by, and I'll be able to go away from this awful place. She looked at the pot of water hanging from the fireplace, steaming and bubbling. She felt suddenly crawly and vile and dirty from what she had seen and she had done during the night. What I need is a bath. All right. So she decides that she needs a bath. After all this stuff, what she really, combating the slimy monster, what she needs is a bath. All right. And she prepares herself a bath, and she jumps in, and then boom, she realizes that Jake somehow made himself inside of the bath, and she kind of just dissolves. And then they're like, well, now they're happily ever after together. And you just kind of see the 4 eyeballs there. So, all right, y'all. So that's the end of the story. Thank you guys for kicking it with me one more time. Checking out these Golden Age books. Man, I'm having a shit ton of fun just rummaging through this. And actually also looking at the history behind these books. And, man, the 50s was such a strange time, dude. So, you guys stay tuned. And I'll see you guys next week. All right? Peace.